Welcome to the GFC podcast. I'm Matt, and I'm joined today by Yaro Hnatusko, who you'll get to know better in just a moment. We launched an initiative recently called Love in Action, and it's all about demonstrating the love of Jesus to our community in tangible ways. So last month, our emphasis was specifically serving the students, families, and staff of Mountain View School. And now in October, our emphasis is giving needed items to help others in our community. So we're collecting 4 things this month: diapers for Agape, specific food items for our community, cookies for Kairos Prison Ministry, which is actually happening in the middle of this month, and then coats for the people of Ukraine. And you can find out more details about all of that at gfcnow.com/loveinaction. But we're collecting these items on Sundays in the lobby, but also throughout the week during office hours. And for those of you who attend GFC online, if you want to participate, we have an Amazon wish list on the website I referenced, so you can help from wherever you are. But today, we want to zoom in on one of those opportunities. So Yaro, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit about your family and your story?
The story is quite adventurous. I came to the U.S. 7 years ago to start a bachelor's degree. While I was in my studies, traveled for quite some time, mostly for work opportunities. Many of them were oriented in the nonprofit work. In that time, I lived in 7 different states until I moved to East Tennessee to start an MBA program that I successfully finished this year in May.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and last year, as soon as the war broke out, it was, of course, a lot of conversations with my older brother, who co-founded the nonprofit with me, but also with my family, what would be the safest place for them, because a big role in that conversation was my younger brother, because he, at that time, was only 17. And for me as an older brother to take responsibility for him, but also for the family to be that mediator for them to transition to a more peaceful environment, and for me to think about the future of my younger brother. So that would be educational opportunities, what work opportunities, because all of that became non-existent in Ukraine.
Wow.
So we started that very difficult conversation about moving them here. But in addition to that difficult conversation is, of course, a lot of difficult paperwork. So they came here last year in September, which marks 1 year this month of them being here. So that's my immediate family, my parents, my younger brother. And as of last Friday, my cousin and his wife moved in with us. So they came from Eastern Europe. They were scattered in Eastern Europe, but finally they're here. And then, of course, it's a large sense of family at home.
Oh, wow. So you have a crowded house.
We do. And we're moving soon to a bigger house, right? We have some people sleeping now in our lobby, but that's very close family. So we were looking forward to everybody being together.
Okay. Now, in a moment, we're going to come back to that organization you co-founded with your brother, and I want to hear more about that. But first, could you tell us, how did you get connected to GFC? I know the story, but share for our listeners that story of how you got connected here.
The very first connection was through Amanda, who leads all the outreach activities in the community. And we started that conversation several months before I actually became an, I wouldn't say active participant in the church, but I became a part of the body of the church, and before I got to meet you. But the conversation with Amanda was, Yaro, we would like to collect some winter clothing for you, where you, Matt, took a very active role, after which we collected 400 bags of winter clothing. And I think the turnout was that nobody even expected to be. So yes, I think where God is present, God is active, everything will work out.
Yeah. So back in March, for those of you who don't know, and many of you might have forgotten, there was a Sunday where we were teaching on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 6, and we told people about the need in Ukraine, and we asked people to leave their coats and their shoes on their seats when they walked out. And the response was wild from what, just like you said, Yaro, there was 400 bags of items that came in after that service and in the afternoon. So tell us, as we think about that, what happened with those items that were collected, those 400 bags? What happened with those?
Yeah, so we completed filling the container in early spring this year, 2023, and then within several weeks after we completed filling it, we have shipped it to Ukraine. Of course, the whole logistics timeline takes about 8 weeks in the best case scenario, considering that there are no problems clearing the items, no problems in the logistics, like the damage to the vehicle or to the driver. Then the items were delivered to our warehouse in Ukraine, on the far east of Ukraine, about 20 to 30 miles away from the border with Ukraine, so within a very vulnerable access of the missiles. But the point for us there was to distribute it to the frontline community. So we have to be present on the ground and be as close to them as possible. So we delivered them in early summer, and we were waiting until late summer and early fall for us to actually start the distribution of winter clothing to those frontline communities, because that's where the need arises, especially for a lot of internally displaced people.
Yeah.
So we have just completed the distribution. So we would set up a lot of hubs in a lot of different communities. We targeted communities like liberated communities. So the ones who have lived through a lot of Russian atrocities, as the ones who have lost all of their possessions, and of course, a lot of damage to their health, mental, physical health, and so on. But what we have learned is that we have seen so many incredible testimonies of people that not only we just distribute winter clothing for them to stay warm, but also we deliver hope to them, because there is also not promise that we will come back to their communities again. But by the time we leave, we know that the hope will stay with them and it will guide them.
Okay, yeah. And you are, through Restore Ukraine, constantly working to help the people of Ukraine. Could you tell us a little bit about what Restore Ukraine does? What's the scope of what you guys do to help families?
Yeah, I will backtrack it a little bit more. We started our operations within the first week of war. Mm-hmm. And in February and March alone, we were feeding several thousand people a day. So we would set up field kitchens in underground metro stations, in different shelters, school dorms. And even though our output was feeding several thousand people a day, it was still a private fundraiser. And we needed to upscale it to an international standalone organization that now is based in the US and in Ukraine, so that we could start forming partnerships with large international organizations, so that we could increase our presence on the ground and deliver a lot more goods to the people. So as of today, we have distributed close to 3 million pounds of humanitarian aid, in addition to the construction efforts. So relating to construction, we rebuilt 60 apartments that were damaged by the missiles.
Okay.
And then two shelters that provided people permanent and temporary residence.
Okay. So rebuilded 60 apartments.
Correct.
So reconstruction is a big part of what you do. And I remember you and I had lunch recently, and you showed me pictures of the state. I think it was your hometown, and it's just so sobering, and clearly there's a need for that. And one thing that you shared, and it just is helpful because it adds color. You know, we all know that there's awful things happening over there, and there's great need. But you shared that whenever there's a missile that hits, the shockwave blows out all the windows within a couple hundred feet.
Correct. So a very clear example. 2 months ago, the missile landed within 200 feet away from my house. So the shockwave was strong enough to damage all the doors, including garage doors and the windows in the entire house. So all of them had to be replaced. So not just the glass itself, which would minimize the expenses, but including the frames of the entire part. Mm-hmm. So that's how the shockwave is strong.
And until it's repaired, rain is leaking in, correct? And
Correct. And then in summer, yes. In fall, yes, it is rain. In winter, it is ice, it is snow, it is cold storm. So that makes any apartment very isolated and not livable.
yes. And one thing you shared with me that really struck me, you said that some people will ask you, why are you trying to rebuild when there's a possibility of things just being torn down again? And the comment you made to me was that the cost of not rebuilding is greater than the cost of building and having it knocked down again. Could you explain about what you meant by that?
What it means is that while Restore Ukraine has a very strong competency in the renovation, it means that we're also a facilitator of people, of making people come back home again. Because once they leave their homes, they're scattered around the country. They have no stable sources of income. They have no stable residence. So now they're just scattered. And we facilitate that process of them coming back home again, where they're safe, where they grew up, went to school, had their first job, where they started their family. So the importance of it is so much larger than us spending an extra, let's say, $1,600. That was our average price tag for each apartment.
Yeah.
That's so much more important for people to be home again.
Yeah, the physical, emotional, mental cost of being displaced, not being able to go back home. Because I would imagine, and maybe you could paint the picture for us, the people who have been displaced in Ukraine, what are the living conditions for most of those folks? Are they all huddled together? I mean, I imagine the quality of life is not what it used to be for many of them. So just give us a picture of how many people have been displaced from those communities and maybe what it's like for them right now.
So currently we are preparing for a lot of winterization projects that will help people reside through the winter safely with all of their needs satisfied. And one of the pushbacks that we have right now is that on the far east there has been a counter-offense from the Russian side. So that means that thousands of people had to be evacuated from the frontline zones to be moved further up the state. So thousands of people are now scattered inside the state with no access to infrastructure. By infrastructure, I mean any residential complexes. So if there are any, they're so filled with people. So the residents, first of all, is not comfortable.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable because even though they reach those shelters, let's say, there is no access for them to any hygiene products, to any food products, because they're not being supported also. So now they are extremely reliant on any humanitarian aid or any organizations like Restore Ukraine.
And one of the things that's unique about you and Restore Ukraine is it's a family enterprise, right? Your brother is on the ground. So is he your boss or are you his boss? Are you giving him orders?
I have more visions than he does.
Okay.
And our roles are also quite different. So if to put it in a much more simple way, I bring everything to Restore Ukraine. So all the income that Restore Ukraine has, that's because it has been my role. Everything that involves the implementation of the large-scale projects, very complex, like let's say a construction or distribution of millions of pounds at a time, that would be my brother overseeing those operations. Because also, since Ukraine, we can say a lot about the country and the people. Also, that country has a lot of corruption. And especially with intensified humanitarian aid being allocated to Ukraine, a lot of financial resources, there is so much room for mismanagement of supplies. And with him being on the ground, I know that everything is under control and we will never waste our donors' money.
Yeah. Wow. So for you, obviously, this is more than a job. It's your heart. I mean, you care deeply, and there's so much brokenness in Ukraine. Could you just maybe respond to why does this matter to you? I mean, why is this clearly such a passion for you? Why is this something that you're giving your life to right now?
On the professional side with Restore Ukraine, I learned that the job has to be a lifestyle. And it doesn't mean to work from 9 to 5 to plug and unplug anytime. It's a lifestyle, so that's what I live through. In the morning when I wake up, late at bed when I go, late at night when I go to bed. And on the spiritual side, of course, when we hear the testimonies of people who have been severely wounded, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, when they can come to us, they can find a safe refuge, but we can come to them. And those testimonies give me so much strength. And actually, before I started Restore Ukraine with my brother, it was late 2021, and I was asking God, can you put me in a position where I can bring change to people? God, can you put me in a position where I work with people and for people? And that's where He has given me the roles that I'm leading now in February 2022.
Yeah, that's just amazing to me how quickly you responded and stepped into this. And it's grown since you started, right? I mean, it's become a much bigger operation.
Correct. We started right in February, and in late spring, I told everybody our goal for this year is to collect $1 million. And for somebody that young, for somebody with no access to the large network and so on, that also limits sometimes the capabilities of Restore Ukraine, I know that our goal is to collect $1 million. And everybody who heard that was out of reach. So their idea was, Yaro, it's time for you to be grounded and more realistic. And then by end of the year, we have collected $1.5 million.
Wow. This is last year.
This is last year. So as of today, we have distributed humanitarian aid with value over $2 million total since we started February 2022.
Wow. So when people are giving to Restore Ukraine, that's going directly to purchase humanitarian aid? Is that right?
Correct. It is to purchase, and it is also to facilitate, because we also have a lot of partners on the ground. That would be from the Eastern Europe, with countries that border Ukraine, or large organizations or agencies that are present in Ukraine. So in most cases, we position ourselves like an implementing partner. So we become their front face and do the work on behalf of those large organizations. Some of them are, for example, under the umbrella of United Nations.
Okay. Is it hard for you to be over here and not on the ground? Obviously, you have a really important role. But is that hard for you to be in the States?
There are limitations, of course. For example, when it comes to forming the partnerships and being very, very active on the ground with the vision I have for the organization and our future trajectory, it has limits. But also, while I'm here, I know that I'm still on humanitarian front. And when I see the miracles like the one I have seen in Grace Fellowship Church, when we collected over 400 bags with winter clothes, and it is also very much worthwhile to be here.
Yeah. Wow. And you and I have talked about this since we took up those clothes and gave them to Restore Ukraine. You've been coming to GFC more regularly. You mind commenting on that? What's that been like for you? I mean, what has church here been like compared to your experiences of church in Ukraine?
Very much difficult transition. The church back home in Ukraine is a very traditional church, very historic, with a, I would say, very strong Orthodox tradition, right? Because it's an Eastern Orthodox church. And what I have learned here, not too long ago, 3 years ago, that was a time when I started actually reading the Bible. And I learned that I was growing in my faith much closer with the people who were local in this community. So at that time, the more I started learning about God, about disciples, about gospels, the more I realized that there is a much bigger gap between me and God. So that started enriching me with more hunger and searched. And what I saw at Grace Fellowship Church is that the church is so active in putting their word into practice, because I have seen a lot of churches, even in East Tennessee, that were present, that were teaching, but they were teaching only on Sundays. So I never got that exposure, that experience of people actually walking the walk during the entire week, during their entire lifetime, not just on Sundays.
Yeah. Well, I hope that's true. And I shared the name of this initiative, Love in Action. It comes out of 1 John, when John, he says, let us love in light of God's love for us. Let us love, not just with our words, but in actions and in truth. And that's a call all of us need to hear. And our church is by no means doing that perfectly. But what a concrete expression of that to be able to give to a need in Ukraine and in our community. Do you have any stories of, through Restore Ukraine, I got to see the picture of them unloading the items that we sent, which is just so cool, and maybe we'll put that on social media, but do you have any stories of families or individuals impacted by your ministry over there?
Many stories, many great testimonies. Some are the ones that actually bring joy. Some are very heartbreaking, especially the testimonies when people come to our hubs and say, Yaro, we need support, but sometimes we don't have enough support to give them. So those are very difficult testimonies. But of course, there are some where only God was so active that it actually happened to save people's lives, delivers them from chaos. So for example, last year, on the second month of war, we were distributing baby food and baby diapers to maternity homes. And we had a volunteer driving. And just for him to deliver those baby supplies, he came under shelling twice, just within minutes. So by the time he reached back to our warehouse to continue the distribution, he was shaken and he couldn't speak for another 2 hours until we happened to calm him down. But that's the price volunteers had to pay just for delivering baby food. So we know that God was so active, and he blessed us and blessed the volunteers and blessed those mothers and their babies, so that delivery could happen. But of course, sometimes we hear different kind of testimonies too. Recently, when we were delivering winter clothing, we were working together with a group of paramedics who are stationed within 2 miles from the front line. So the atrocities and the damage they see, also their testimonies are the ones that nobody further away got to experience, and she wishes nobody else to ever experience that. But when we have conversations, sometimes she says, Yaro, sorry, I have no energy to talk today. I lost 6 soldiers today. So she couldn't retrieve 6 soldiers in that day. Sometimes she sends me a message. She says, the leader of the paramedic group, she says, Yaro, I want you to get on a video call. I have a great group of people who we just help, and they want to tell you thank you for delivering winter clothing.
You know, one of the things that I'm feeling as I'm talking with you, and I don't know if anybody resonates with this, but when all of this started happening in it's last year, right? You said February. It was on everybody's radar. We were all thinking about it, praying about it. But over time, I don't know if this feels true to you, it kind of lost its place in our consciousness. We don't think about it, but it's still happening over there. I mean, if there's one thing you want to tell, you'd want us to know about the state of Ukraine right now. I mean, we can kind of read the news, but what would you say? What's it like now? And maybe connected with that, what's one thing we could pray for as we're listening to this, as we think about praying and lifting up the people of Ukraine?
The way the war started, and it's a full-scale war, a lot of people didn't process it enough. So a lot of people called it a conflict some even told me that it was a situation. So not a lot of people in the beginning of war understood the impact of war, of Russians bombing maternity homes, children's hospitals, schools, apartments. And the way we are today, everybody has a much clearer picture of the devastation in Ukraine. But not everybody takes an active role just because, like you said, it's so much out of our radar. And what we already see this year, the number of humanitarian aid being shipped to Ukraine has greatly declined.
Oh, it's declined.
Greatly.
Okay.
And the amount of financial resources being allocated to Ukraine also greatly dropped.
Okay.
So now we have to operate with much less. So, and that trend line will continue. And we know that next year we have elections coming in the US, which will be very much possessed by the news. So that means that Ukraine will be nowhere to be found again. So that means that a lot less active people are being on the humanitarian front line in Ukraine.
Yeah. You've been talking about Restore Ukraine. What's the mission? Do you have a one-sentence mission statement?
We do. Our mission is to provide a range of humanitarian, construction, housing, and medical assistance projects.
Okay. And so again, we get to partner with you in one aspect of that by donating coats. And this month, that's the opportunity, that's the invitation to everybody listening to this. You can take an active role in providing relief in a tangible way for families in Ukraine by bringing your coat to GFC. Just for fun, Yaro, because your English is very good. I'm very impressed. I've always enjoyed our conversations. But could you share your mission statement for Restore Ukraine? Could you share that in Ukrainian, just so we could hear what it would sound like?
I never actually received that question, and I never thought about the mission statement in Ukrainian.
Or a Bible verse, whatever you'd like to share. Or you could tell me how awful it is to talk. I mean, you could say something offensive to me. I wouldn't know it. But could you just rattle off a little bit of Ukrainian so that we could hear it?
I will need to take a second.
That is totally fine. And you can say, Matt, hard pass. I don't want to do that too.
No, I would definitely do. And what I want to say is a part of the heritage of my family, the part of the Ukrainian culture. It says, "Mi dim, tvi dim," which means my house, your house. And you might hear that statement in a lot of different nations. And what it means in my family is that my door is always open for you.
Thank you for sharing that. So in Ukrainian, it's
Mi dim, tvi dim.
Okay, I'm not going to try to pronounce the second part. I so appreciate you being here today, and it's great to talk with you. It always lifts my spirit, and it's sobering too. And I'm just reminded of the great need and the great opportunity we have to be a part of what God's doing through you, through your brother. And just want to thank you for your leadership and for your tender heart to God, to be used by him. And so for anybody listening who wants to find out more about Restore Ukraine, how can people do that? If people want to find out more about you or Restore Ukraine, where do they go?
So people go on restore-ukraine.org. That's our website, and our website is updated very frequently. So what they see on a website is actually very relevant, sometimes data, sometimes information, sometimes article. For example, what's the current status of a humanitarian crisis? What does it mean for a regular Ukrainian family to live on their monthly salary and so on? So they could actually get the view of Ukraine and our communities through our eyes.
Wonderful. So again, that website is restore-ukraine.org. And thanks again, Yaro, for being here today. And thank you to all of you for listening. And we would love for you to jump in and give to this opportunity, as well as to the needs in our local community that we're giving to this month. And you can learn more about how to do that at gfcnow.com/loveinaction. And we would love to know, too, what you thought about this podcast. So send in your comments, your questions for a future episode to podcast@gfcnow.com. And please take 30 seconds to subscribe. And if you'd leave us a 5-star review, that would help people find this podcast easier and hear the content. Have a great week.